Alrighty, good evening, everyone. And thank you once again for joining me and Chaz and John Green as we have our fourth installation of looking at tefillot and songs of the holidays. The entire series kind of was born because we understood that this year we wouldn't have the opportunity to sing and daven together in the same way that we normally get to. So we decided that this was a wonderful opportunity. It's really been a pleasure to learn and to sing with everyone over the last number of weeks. So tonight we're going to be focusing on Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. So the songs that we're going to be, the tefillot that we'll look at this evening, some of them are tefillot, and some of them are songs or shorter pieces that are often sung during Hakafot at Simchas Torah night or Simchas Torah day. So before we jump in, I just want to let you know what we'll be looking at this evening. So we're going to start off with Mi PL, which is a really fun song that is sung on Simchas Torah. And then we'll move into Tfilat Geshem, which is recited on Shemini Atzeret day. And so we'll look at why we're doing it and some of the language, and then we'll hear part of the rendition from Chaz and Green. And then after that, we'll look at two smaller pieces. We're going to look at Adir Adirenu, which is a piece that's incorporated into all of the Musaf Kedushas of the Shalosh Regalim and also of the Yamim Noraim. And then we'll conclude with our text with Hamalach HaGoaloti, which is famously sung during Kol HaNe'arim, when on a regular year, all of the children ascend the Bima toward the end of V'zot HaBracha. And at the end, we'll have some time to sing a little bit more with Chaz and Green. Okay, so in just a moment, I'll pull up the source sheet. I'm also going to post it in the chat in case anybody did not receive the email with the sources. So let me just share that with you all right now, and then I'll pull it up as well on the screen. Alrighty, so it's going in the chat now, and I'll also pull it up in just a moment. So Mi PL, which is a fun song that we sing on Simchat Torah, we don't really know who authored it. The authorship is unknown to us. It's an alphabetical acrostic, like many songs that were composed in Piyutim. And it was actually not composed for Simchas Torah, right? It's most famously known for Simchas Torah, but if you were to choose one holiday in the Jewish calendar that is similar to Simchas Torah, but not quite Simchas Torah, what holiday do you think it was composed for? You could write it in the chat. Right, it's similar, but not quite. Exactly, Shavuot. Thank you, Chaz and Green. Shavuot. So it was composed for Shavuot because it talks about Matan Torah. And so I'm going to pull it up right now, and we'll just look at a few pieces, and then we'll dive right into the singing of this song. Okay. All right. So Mi Pikel is the refrain that is over and over again is essentially praising God for giving us the Torah, for speaking to the Torah to us, and for blessing us with essentially with God's presence, with God's blessings, and with the Torah that he gave us. So it goes through an alphabetical acrostic like many do, in Adir Kashem, in Baruch, etc. There's no one who is as powerful as Hashem. And what you'll notice is every single paragraph has four participants. It's the same in each one. It starts with Hashem, Ein Adir Kashem. Then it goes to Moshe Rabbeinu, who here is referred to as Ben Amram, right? Moshe Rabbeinu is the son of Amram. It's kind of strange. We don't usually refer to Moshe Rabbeinu as the son of Amram. So he's occasionally referred to that by Chazal, but really here what's going on here is it fits nicely with the poem and with the rhythm that the author was trying to get. You know, if you just say Ve'en Baruch Kemoshe, it kind of drops off. They needed a bit of a longer stretch there, so they say Kevein Amram. So we have Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah itself, in Gedulat HaTorah, and the last one is the Jewish people, in Dorsheak Yisrael. And these four participants are what allows Torah to continue to be in the world and what allows Torah to continue generation to generation. Hashem gave it to us. Moshe Rabbeinu was the conduit for Matan Torah, and then the Torah itself and us, the Jewish people. So when you look throughout the whole song, it praises each participant all throughout. And you can look at some of them inside as well afterward. And it obviously fits really nicely into Simchat Torah, because Simchat Torah is our time where we not only celebrate the Torah, but we do so in so many ways. We do so many things. We dance, we sing, we lane at night, we lane during the day, we lane in the after. It's the time where we get to spend as much time kind of living the Torah as we can. And so that's why this song has become very popular in many communities. And at this point, at this juncture, I'll turn it over to Chazan Green, who will sing and lead us in this song, Mi Pikel.
All right, hello everyone. Thank you again to Rabbi Buchler and to the Jewish Center for hosting this shiur. I will now sing Mi Piel. It's one of my favorite tunes of Simchat Torah, and I've been singing it since, I don't know, as long as I can remember, in high school. And the reason why it's so different than most of these Simchat Torah Nigonim is because we tend to use a more Mizrahi sounding tune for this. In fact, I'm not really familiar with any others. I did a little YouTube search before this shiur, and that's really all I could find. So I'd be interested in knowing if you're familiar with others. Feel free to send me a link. But in the meantime, to get us in the spirit of Simchas Torah, here we go. And as always, with all of the shiur installments we've had thus far, feel free to sing on your own, in the comfort of your home, and enjoy. Okay. Mi piel yevorach kol Yisrael. Mi piel yevorach kol Yisrael. En adir kashem v'en baruch keven amram. En gedula katorah v'en dochshea keYisrael. Mi piel yevorach Yisrael. Mi piel yevorach kol Yisrael. En hadur kashem v'en vatik keven amram. En zechia katorah v'en chachamea keYisrael. Mi piel yevorach kol Yisrael. Mi piel yevorach kol Yisrael. We'll do one more. En tahor kashem v'en yashar keven amram. En kevuda katorah v'en lomedea keYisrael. Mi piel yevorach kol Yisrael. Mi piel yevorach kol Yisrael.
Thank you, Chazan Green, for that wonderful rendition. And like he said, with a little bit of a Mizrahi feel to it as well, which is really nice touch as well. Okay, so now we're going to turn over to Tfilat Geshem. So Geshem is a special tefillah that we add on Shemini Atzeret, where we first, during Musaf, begin to essentially announce to Hashem that we want the rain to start to come, although not quite yet, in a couple of weeks, right? So during our davening on Shemini Atzeret in Musaf, we'll include Mashiv HaRuach, Murid HaGeshem. And so we have a very special and ancient piyut that's incorporated within the Chazarat Hashatz that is done at Musaf. The piyut itself, which is a couple of paragraphs, was written by the famous Elazar HaKalir, right? So this is going back 1,500 years to the land of Israel. And what I'd like to do this evening, just for a couple of minutes, is to look at a few pieces, motifs, within the poetry itself, to kind of get a sense as to what's going on here. Yeah, we're asking for rain, but how do we do it? What are the mechanisms and tools that we, the Jewish people, use through the piyut to turn toward Hashem and request that rain and the rainy season come with bracha? So at this point, I'll share my screen and pull up the piyut, and if you have it on the side, you can do so as well. Okay. Okay, so Tefillah Geshem, like I said, it's part of the Chazarat HaShatz of Musaf. So you open with the regular davening, or Baruch Hashem, etc., until Moshiach U'Magen. And at that point, we start to introduce the first addition. This addition comes before the actual bracha of Magen Avraham, so it's kind of breaking up the first bracha itself. And this first part, just want to focus on really one piece here, which is the first two words, Af Beri. Right, so what is this Af Beri? Right, so if you look in the Af Beri Utat Shem Sar Matar, who is Af Beri? It tells us Af Beri is the designated name of the angel of rain. Right, so we have this angel that appears in certain places in Chazal, and the name of the Malach is Af Beri. What does Af Beri mean? So essentially, what is Af in modern Hebrew? So an Af can be a nose. So Af can also mean anger. And bari is similar to the Hebrew word that you might know as bari, right? You're healthy, so you bari with an aleph at the end. So af bari literally means healthy and angry, essentially good and bad in one, because essentially the angel of rain can go in two different ways. The natural world can either be an amazing place, you can have rain and it can be great for the produce of the land, or you can have what we've been having in the Gulf Coast, for example, where you can have hurricanes. So Af Beri is the angel of rain, and we're kind of asking God to send this angel of rain in its proper time. And if you look at the very end of each line here, it rhymes with the word matar. Matar being one of the biblical words for rain. Matar, ulahamtar, la'atar, shtar, matar. So that's the opening. And then we say Baruch Hashem Magen Avraham. We continue on. And at this point, you'll notice that what's the end word of the next paragraph? Right, before we even look at any of the themes and the motifs, Geshem, right? So it's now going to rhyme with Geshem, which is obviously another word for rain. So we ask that Hashem bring this rain in its proper time. And we'll just jump down now to the next part, which is where I want to focus on now, where we now open up and say the following, Elokeinu ve'elokei avotenu, right? God of our fathers. And if you look at the bot ends here, this now all rhymes with mayim. So the next number of paragraphs are all mayim. So now we've had a third word for rain, right? The Hebrew language has a number or for water, a number of words related to that. And at this point, what happens is quite fascinating. The author, Kalir, decided that for this particular piyut that we incorporate for Tfilat HaGeshem, he wanted to focus on rain, but in a very specific way. So if you look at this first paragraph, we'll see it hinted to, but it's not quite clear. You have to kind of see a couple paragraphs to figure out what's going on here, but I'll kind of tip it off to you a little bit, because if you look here, it opens up Zichor, remember. We call to God to remember. Av, remember the father. Who's this father that we're asking him to remember? We're asking him to remember a specific character that's connected to water. Who is it? Remember the Av, who was drawn out to you like water. So I'll kind of let you know, give you a little hint that we're going to be talking about Avram Avinu in this very first paragraph in poetic language. And we talk about him because Avram Avinu was drawn toward Hashem like water flowing in a river. So we focus on Avram Avinu because we start talking about it in a metaphoric way, but we actually get down a little bit more into detail with Avraham and water. Does anybody know, if you want to put in the chat, when in Avraham's career was there ever water in a story? Does anybody have any idea? When did Avraham have water involved in a story? Okay, so Mordechai says the wells. Good, one of them is the wells. Remember, Avraham digs wells. So we have wells that Avraham digs. We also have, if you remember, Avram says to Sarah, when the angels come, fetch water so you can bathe the feet of the angels. So if you look in the paragraph itself, we have some allusions to that, right? It was derashtav bizaro al kol mayim. You requested that water be brought to you. So we have that. Also, we have a Hagar. There's also water that Avram gave to Hagar. So we have places where Avram is involved with water. So what we do to Hashem is we turn to God and we say we want water, and if we're not eligible for water, if for whatever reason we've sinned and we're not eligible for it, So remember Avram Havinu, like we say, Magen Avraham, turned towards Avraham Avinu because you gave him water and he provided others water. So please provide with us water as well. So that's the first character we look at. Second, Zechor Hanolad, remember the one who was born when we were told Yukach na me'at mayim. So this is connected to Avram Avinu. Avram and Sarah are told they're going to have a son. Immediately after, Sarah brings water, and the pasuk says, "Yukach na me'at mayim." Avram says, "Please bring me water so that we can bathe them." And then it also turns towards the Akedah. Remember when we were going to do the Akedah, l'shochto l'shpoch damo kamayim. We were going to shecht Yitzchak Avinu on the altar, and his blood would flow like water. So we see the connections that the author is bringing before us. And then, like Mordechai said, Chafar u'matzah be'erot mayim. Just like Avraham built wells, so did Yitzchak. So we have two characters mentioned, Avram and Yitzchak. Who's going to be the next character right after Avram Yitzchak? Yaakov. So how does Yaakov have any story with water? When does Yaakov have water? Anybody have any idea what stories is there water with for Yaakov? Might be a little less direct. But if you remember, just before Yaakov left Canaan to go to Lavan's house when he crossed over, so he had a dream in Beit El, the angels going up and down, and then he crosses over the Yarden. And then when he returns, right after he crosses over the Yarden, when he returns 20 some odd years later, that's when he meets the angel again. And at this point, he crosses back over the Yarden. So both major moments in Yaakov Avinu's life happen just before he crosses over a body of water. So that's referenced to here because it talks about the makel, the staff that he had when he crossed over, and the pasuk tells us that explicitly, that he had a staff when he crossed over the water. We also have the well, right? The well with Leah and Rachel in the beginning of the story. So we have Yaakov at a well. So the third character is Yaakov Avinu. Who's the fourth character? I'm just going to say one word, Teva. So there's two characters you could think of when you hear the word Teva and water. So Noach is one of them, but here we're not going to talk about Noach because we're keeping it, post Avram Avinu. The second character is Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu was put into a Teva, right? That's put down the Nile River by his mother. So Moshe Rabbeinu is saved through water. So we reference Moshe Rabbeinu here, and he also saves Tzipporah when he goes to meet her for the first time by kicking out the shepherds and saving Tzipporah for the first time. So again, and also we have the Selah, the rock that he hits. So it also becomes his demise, right? He's saved through water, and it's also his demise. But all of that is put into the character of Moshe Rabbeinu and into the paragraph about Moshe's life. Who else is our final character? However, it's not really a character here. It's more like one more character, Aharon. Look here. When does Aharon, think about Moshe's brother Aharon, when would he go into water? Any ideas? When does Aharon go into water? The mikvah. Thank you. I got a private message here. It's from the mikvah. Exactly. Aaron, who was the Kohen Gadol, famously, obviously, many people go into a mikvah, but Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, is the most famous person who will go into a mikvah many, many times, chamesh tvilot, 5 times over Yom Kippur. So the fifth person mentioned here is Aaron. And he goes in, and he also is the one who gets to sprinkle para aduma blood, which is also mixed with water. And he also gets to use the tarat mayim. So again, we have another character, Aaron, who might also just be a representation of Kohen Gadol in general, who has a relationship with water. So we turn to God in Tfilat Geshem and say, we may not be worthy of water, but Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, and Aaron, it sounds like we're doing Ushpizin, right? All were worthy of water. And the final paragraph here that references a person is not really a person, it's the 12 tribes of Israel. Zechor shneim asar shvatim, remember the Jewish people. They went through Kriyas Yamsuf, Gziras Mayim, also on the way back, right, when they came through the Yarden at the end of the story with Yehoshua, right? So remember the Jewish people. If you can't, if the Avram, it's like, yeah, remember the 600,000 plus who went through water, both when they left Mitzrayim and also when they returned to the land of Israel. And we conclude that paragraph, Bitzidkam chon chashrat mayim, in the righteousness of all of those people, please bring us the proper rain. And then we say, Sha'atahu Hashem Elokeinu mashiv haruach umarid hageshem. And it concludes, for bracha and not for klala, etc. Before I turn it over to the Chazan, I wanted to just mention one other key point, which I never noticed in Tfilat Geshem until I was preparing for this. And I haven't really seen anybody else reference it, but it is fascinating. And I just have to share it with you because it's really amazing, and I wanted to save it for the end. Remember, I've just mentioned all of these characters, right? Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, and the Jewish people. So when you look at each of these characters, essentially, right, we're going to just focus on the people, not the Shvatim. So it references the person, right? Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, and Aaron. But if you look very carefully in each of these paragraphs, each paragraph, there is an allusion, if not an explicit reference, to their Ezer Kenegdo, to their wife. And it's fascinating. If you look at the paragraph with Avram, so Avram and Sarah, so obviously Avram and Sarah, because Sarah is referenced both in actually Isaac's paragraph, but also in Avram's paragraph, as the one who actually brings the water to wash the feet of the angels. Who's married to Yitzchak? Rivka. So within the paragraph of Yitzchak, it says, Ziher gam hu lishpoch lev kamayim. Yitzchak pours out his heart like water. When did he do that? Famously, Yitzchak is lasuach basadeh, right? Mincha, tfilas mincha, comes from Yitzchak Avinu when he davens in the field, and immediately afterwards, Rivka shows up. Right? He's davening, and Rivka comes. So the story of Rivka is within this story as well. He's davening, and then Rivka shows up. Yaakov. So Yaakov, obviously, he removes this gal, yiched lev vegal even. He rolls the stone off of the well to help Rachel so she can get her water. And then we get to Moshe Rabbeinu. So who's Moshe Rabbeinu? Tzipporah. So obviously Tzipporah as well, because he goes to the well and pushes off the shepherds. Namu dalo dala b'hishkatzon mayim. So we get Moshe and Tzipporah. And finally, we turn to Aaron. So anybody remember who Aaron's wife's name? What's Aaron's wife's name? Tricky one. Anybody? She's mentioned at least once in the Torah. So Elisheva, so her name doesn't appear here. But what we are referenced and referred to here is the fact that he has to be ruchak me'am. What does the Kohen Gadol have to do a week before Yom Kippur? He must separate from the Jewish people. And this is not only an allusion to separating from the people to purify himself, but famously, the Kohen Gadol must be married, right? If the Kohen Gadol, Rachmana Litzlan's wife, passes away 2 seconds before Yom Kippur, they marry him off quickly, and he does the Kohen, and he's the Kahuna, and he does the Avoda. So here, he has to separate for a week from his wife and from the Jewish people, because he, in essence, represents the father of the Jewish people, so he must be married. And at this point, it also references him separating himself from his wife and from the Jewish people. So we have this really fascinating connection between the male figures who are explicitly referenced and their female counterparts who are implicitly within the story. And what I realized from reading this text is that I think Kalir is doing this in a specific fashion, because often Chazal compare rain in the rainy season to a union between a husband and a wife. Right? In essence, they refer to the earth as kind of, we talk about in English, like Mother Nature. They refer to earth in the feminine, and the rain that's coming down in the heavens is in the masculine. So we kind of see the union between husband and wife and the union between rain and earth also within this paragraph as well. So I wanted to leave you with that thought. And hopefully as we hear now and when we dive in Tfilas Geshem in just a few short days, we'll be blessed with Geshem Libracha Velo Liklala.
Hello again. All right, so for Geshem, keep my remarks brief, but one thing to mention is, like in the last year where I pointed out that certain aspects of the Sukkot Nusach remind us of the Nusach of Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Geshem and also Tal have certain resonances of the Yemim Noraim as well. So listen out for that. Additionally, this often is done to Nusach, so I'll show you a sample of different parts. Sometimes a lot of it is done to a tune. I'll use a tune towards the end. And of course, if you're familiar with it, feel free to hum along or sing along. And it's not part of our scheduled programming tonight for me to give a full rendition of Geshem. You'll hear that over Shemini Atzeret. But I'll give you just a drizzle of Geshem now. Afberi utachim sar matar lihaviv lihani liharik liamtar mahimi bimbom geliatar L'vayu ataru b'nishyon shitar Amunim ganon bam shoalei matar Yotriach lefaleg mi peleg Hashem Limogeg pnei neshi B'tzachot leshem Mahim liadrach kinit v'reshem Ay, 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 ay Lehargia b'rafam linfulchei neshem L'achayot mazkirim geburot hagashem Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu Zechor af nimshach acharecha kamayim Pirachdo k'etz shatul al palgei mayim genato Hitzato miyeshu mimayim Derashto bezaro al kol mayim Zechor anulad b'bsarat yukachno miat mayim V'sachta lehoro leshachato Lishpach damo kamayim ziher gamu Lishpach lev kamayim Chafaru matzah b'yerot mayim Now skipping towards the end. Zechor shnei masar shevatim she'avarta b'gizrat mayim Shehim takta lamo merirut mayim Toldotam yishpach damam alecha kamayim Teifen ki nafshenu hafefu mayim Shata Adonai Eloheinu mashiv haruach umorid hagashem livracha velo liklala lechaim velo lemavet Lesova velo lerazon.
Thank you, Chaz and Greed. And as you were reciting that last paragraph there, I realized that within the final paragraph about the Shvatim, we actually do have their female counterpart, in essence, which is Miriam, right? It talks about the water that was bitter became sweet. And famously, the Miriam's well is, we have obviously the miracle of Moshe Rabbeinu that took place there, but clearly the water source of the Jewish people throughout their time in the Midbar was on account of Miriam, and when she died, we didn't have water. So she kind of is thrown in there as well. Okay, so now we're going to turn to two last pieces we'll look at inside for much shorter than Tfilat Geshem. The first one is Adir Adirenu, followed by Hamalach Hagoel Oti. So Adir Adirenu, you're probably already thinking the tunes. There's maybe one or two of the tunes that you know in the back of your head. And Adir Adirenu was originally only sung on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is kind of funny because I always thought about it as like a Musaf, Sukkot, Shemini Atzeret, Pesach. That's what it came to mind in my head. But actually, originally, it was only Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And 1,000 years ago, that all changed. So, when I say originally, for the first number of years that it was said, but about 1,000 years ago, that changed. And it changed on account of an actual story that took place. And it's great when we have books, ancient books that describe stories as to why a minhag or a liturgical piece changed into being accepted into various places. So if you recall, when we talked about Unatana Tokef, there was this whole myth about the authorship. So here we have a shorter story, but it takes place also in the same places in Ashkenaz. This time we're in the city of Speyer. And we have the story that's recorded by a number of Rabbanim in the medieval period about Rabbi Eliakim ben Meshulam, right? Eliakim ben Meshulam was part of that massive colonialist family, the famous families in Ashkenaz in the three cities in the Rhineland. And the story goes as follows. So what happened was Shavuos was approaching, and everyone's getting to shul, and finally Shavuos begins. Musaf comes around the next day. And the Rav of Speyer, Rav Eliakim ben Meshulam, turns toward the Chazan just before Musaf. And he says, Ad Adir Adirenu. At that moment, the Chazan, the story described, the Chazan looks at him in a funny way, and he says, add it. So he does, right? The Rav of your shul tells you to add something, so you do it. And then afterwards, the whole congregation erupts in anger. And it describes this in the story. They're so annoyed. Imagine if the rabbi said, we're going to do Unatana Tokef tomorrow. We don't do that. That's saved for special times. And Adir Adirenu was the same. We don't say Adir Adirenu on Shavuos. But the rabbi said, listen, Adir Adirenu quotes from parts of Tehillim, specifically from Tehillim chapter 51, right there. Adir Adirenu Hashem Adonenu Ma'adir Shimcha B'chol Haaretz. So parts of that pasuk, of that line, come from Psalm 51. And so the rabbi pointed out, the Rav of Speyer pointed out that the Gemara teaches us that when the angels were singing in heaven during Matan Torah, they were reciting those words from the psalm. So he said, obviously, during Kedusha, which is the time where the angels up high are singing and we down below are singing and being Mekadesh, the Shem Hashem, so we should sing it on Shavuos. And so the people still were pretty angry with him. Okay, nice vort, but that's not what we do. And he quoted them a pasuk in Mishlei and said, you should listen to your elder. And they accepted it. So that's the origin story of adding Adir Adirenu into Musaf, at least on Shavuos. And then over the next couple of centuries, it kind of got added to this. People liked it. It caught on, and it slowly made its way into all of the different Musafs that we recite on Yom Tov. We don't say it, for example, on a Shabbos Chol HaMoed. That the practice is not to. And the reason we actually refrain from doing it on a Shabbos Chol HaMoed, for example, and even in a Musaf, is because Adir Adirenu, and I'll pull up the source now, is about the end of days. And what do we know? What does Chazal tell us about the end of days? I'll just scroll down here. What does Chazal tell us about the end of days, right? eventually there's going to be Mashiach's going to come. Things are going to be great. Peace is going to be, everyone's going to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Adir Adirenu, like how mighty it is that everyone's going to do and know your name. Ma Adir Shimcha Bechol Ha'aretz. Everyone's going to know who you are, Hashem. V'haya Hashem Lamelech HaKol Ha'aretz. God's going to be king of the universe, of the world. On that day, his name will truly be one. So what's wrong with saying this on Shabbos? So the practice emerged that Chazal teach us that Mashiach is not going to come on Shabbos, right? Because God doesn't want us to have to accidentally be Mechal Shabbos, book our plane tickets, whatever it might be. God doesn't want us to do that. So even Erev Shabbos, where we're told that really he's not going to come at that point. So says Chazal, we don't want to include it on a day that it's on a Shabbos Chol Hamoed, for example. So in some kihilot, in some shuls, they actually also would omit it on a Yom Tov Shabbos, but many shuls, they do say it on a Yom Tov Shabbos. But that's Adir Adirenu. And it's been incorporated now in all musafs across the board in Ashkenaz for many centuries now. And again, it talks about the future redemption. And Yom Tov certainly is focused on the Beit HaMikdash, because musaf, which is where we incorporate it, is all about the korbanot that we can't give. Right? We say, right? We're not there. So we added in to Kedusha on Musaf as almost like a pick-me-up. We want to be there. We can't. So we're hoping and praying for that day to come. And so Adir Adirin is a beautiful addition to our tefillot, especially to our Musaf prayers. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Chaz and John Green.
I wouldn't dare sing a tune for Adir Durenu that's not the Jewish Center tune, of course. Now, I don't know how long this tune has been around for. All I know is that when I started singing at the Jewish Center, your former Chazan Chaim David Burson instructed me that this is the Jewish Center tune. Perhaps he introduced it, or maybe it was someone before him. I didn't get the whole history. Now, if you're not familiar with where this tune comes from, it is actually from Judas Maccabeus of George Frederick Handel, which is probably a terribly Americanized pronunciation of his name. Maybe, I think I heard online it was like Georg Friedrich Handel or something. And I'm sharing that with you so that you can look up the original yourself and enjoy the beauty of that composition. I'm actually going to post in the chat right now a YouTube link. And I think it leads you right to the spot where that tune appears in the piece. So you can enjoy that afterwards. And yes, let's get started. Adir Adirenu, Adonai Adonenu, Ma'adir Shimcha Bechol Haaretz, V'haya Adonai Lemelech Al Kol Haaretz, V'yom Hahu Yiyeh Adonai Echad U'Shmo Echad.
Thank you for that. And, Yash Koch on the pronunciation, but there are probably people on the Zoom call who could correct that pronunciation, but thank you. That was beautiful. Okay, so now we turn to our final text that we have in front of us. And then at the end, we'll have a little bit more time to sing together, which is Hamala Chago Eloti. Right, so Hamala Chago Eloti, I always, everyone grew up probably hearing it in shul. People sing it to their babies, to their children. It's a beautiful pasuk from the Torah, right? At the end of Sefer Breshit, when Yaakov is blessing Yosef before he dies, he turns to him and says, "May the angel who protected me and protected Avram and Yitzchak and me," meaning Yaakov, who's telling the story, protect you, Yosef, and essentially the Jewish people as well. In good times and in challenging times. And so there's a custom that is quite old, many centuries old, that all the children under the age of bar and bat mitzvah and essentially get an aliyah, right? They come up to the Torah for the final aliyah before we start Chatan Torah, Chatan Breshit, etc. And all the children come up, and in many communities, ours as well, there's a big talus is held over the children. And this the children get their aliyah with an individual. It's interesting. In some communities, I was looking to some of them co-wrote, in some communities, they actually had a child under the age of bar mitzvah get the aliyah, which is interesting. We don't normally think that children under 13, men under 13 get the aliyah. But in some communities, that was the practice. And then in most communities, it was the practice to give it to somebody over the age of bar mitzvah. And it was actually the case in many places that the person who got the aliyah of Kol HaNa'arim, it was more expensive than Chatan Torah and Chatan Breshit, right? When people would pay for the aliyah, it was the most treasured aliyah because you had, hundreds of children who got to get the aliyah with you as well. But what exactly is going on here, right? We don't give children aliyot, right? We don't do that. Like, why are all these kids coming up to the bima? This is not something that's normally done. So what was the purpose behind the practice, and why do we still do it today? So I think it's very simple, and some of the texts allude to this, which is that at the very end of the Torah, right, the last couple of words of the Torah describe Moshe Rabbeinu's death, and that everything Moshe Rabbeinu did was le'inei kol Yisrael, was before the people of Israel, was for the Jewish people. And who else, besides children, are the future that are going to carry the Torah that we're now completing? So the practice was that children who were under the age of bar and bat mitzvah would come up and essentially have the aliyah together because they are the future, right? We're concluding the Torah and we're going to start it anew, and without them, the Torah can't go on. So the practice began that children would come up for this aliyah, and also interesting in some places, right? If you're a Kohen or a Levi, so you can't get, Revi or Chami, whatever aliyah, you can't get that aliyah. So in some communities, they actually had all the little Kohanim come up for the Kohen aliyah, all the Leviim come up for the Levi aliyah. Today, we kind of just lump them all together. But the whole purpose is, it's chinuch, it's to teach them, this is what Jews do. We treasure the Torah, we bless the Torah, we come up and are able to partake in the Torah. And so after the aliyah, for centuries, at least 500-600 years, Jews would then sing Hamala Chago Eloti. It's a serenading tune that we know, but also the words are so powerful as we as a community bless the next generation at this juncture where we're about to begin Sefer Breshit. We want the children to come along and be the generation that carries the Torah onward. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Chazan to sing Hamala Chago Eloti.
Okay, so for this I'll sing two tunes. I'm used to singing these tunes around this hour as my children usually go to bed around, I don't know, well, it doesn't really matter, I suppose, but I didn't have a chance to sing to them tonight. And this will be my opportunity to sing these songs as it's part of Kriyat Shema Alamita as well. And it's something that my wife and I, Yael and myself, we treasure. Part of our nightly routine, singing to our children. It's something we enjoy for Kol HaNa'arim as well. Hamalach hagoel oti, Hamalach hagoel oti mikora, Yivarech et hane'arim, Yikarev Shemini, Hamalach hagoel oti, Hamalach hagoel oti mikora, Yivarech et hane'arim, Yikarev b'hem Shemi. V'shem avotai, v'shem avotai, Avraham Yitzchak ve'yidgul harav, ve'yidgul harav b'kerev haaretz. Now for a second tune. Hamalach hagoel oti mikora, yivarech et hane'arim. Hamalach hagoel oti mikora, yivarech et hane'arim. Beshem Avotai, Beshem Avotai, Avraham veYitzchak, veYirgu larav b'kerev haaretz. Beshem Avotai, Beshem Avotai, Avraham veYitzchak, veYirgu larav b'kerev haaretz.
Thank you very much, Chaz and John Green. So this brings us to the conclusion of our source sheet, but I figured we had a few extra minutes, and we'd love if everyone would stick around to hear some of the kind of classic tunes that are sung during Hakafos. Right, this year Hakafos are going to look totally different. It's almost like we're just doing it to check off the box that we have a Torah and we're walking around with it, but unfortunately we can't really dance and sing with the Torah. So I wanted to take this opportunity to sing some of the classic songs from Hakafot. And for this, I'll turn it back over to Chaz and John Green. I just want to take this opportunity also to thank you all for coming over the last couple of weeks. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to learn with all of you. And I wish each and every one of you a Chag Sameach.
Torah Hashem temimah, Torah Hashem temimah, Torah Hashem temimah, mejiva nafesh, Torah Hashem temimah, Torah Hashem temimah, Torah Hashem temimah, mejiva nafesh, Eros Hashem Machimas bezi Eros Hashem Nemanai Machimas bezi Ashreinu matov chalkeinu manahim goraleinu ay Ashreinu matov chalkeinu manahim goraleinu ay Ashrayam shehekachada, Ashrayam sheHashem melokam, Ashrayam shehekachada, Ashrayam sheHashem melokam, ay 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 la 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 ay 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 la 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 ay. Seyo sheyarim rashechem enasu v'yischayolam yavo melech hakavod zela ay ay seyo sheyarim rashechem enasu v'yischayolam yavo melech hakavod zela ay ay la 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 ay 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 la 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 Thank you all very much. Chag Sameach. Thank you to my wonderful accompaniment as I'm here at my in-laws, and thank you to Rabbi Buchler. Thank you to you all. Chag Sameach once again.
Chag Sameach. I've allowed participants to unmute yourselves if you'd like to. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Thank you.
Yeah.
חג שמח, תודה רבה.
תודה רבה.
תודה רבה.
תודה רבה. חג שמח.
A good yontif.